This has come to the part of the day where we're entering our very last panel. But this is one of the panels where you hear about international productions and why, what the what for is, what the difference is. And I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves to us. And by the way, thank you for sponsoring it. And I will start out with you. If you can introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do and why you're here. And
good evening, everyone. My name is Suzette Zayden. I come from Belize. I am the founder and director of the Belize International Film Festival. We're going into our 14th year this November.
Wow.
And I'm representing the Belize Film Commission, where my office within the National Institute of Film and History and Culture in Belize oversees the permitting process and all the film production that actually comes into the country of Belize. So that's it. We're here today to share our information with you guys.
Okay, so tell me about your festival, though.
Oh, okay.
As
I said before, this is going to be our 14th year. We have several categories. The feature narrative, feature documentary, short documentary, and short narrative. Those are the competitive categories. They're pretty much open to anyone, although I will be honest that we try to encourage films from our region, which is the Caribbean and Central America and Mexico. But they are open to world cinema and anyone who wants to apply, so we do not discriminate. We encourage the mix of films because we would like to see our films from the Caribbean also be on the same stage and same quality as international films. So that's part of our motivation for that. But we're also having a film market this year for the first time. The festival takes place from November 6th to 10th. The market will be 7th and 8th. And we're working with some new partners, potentially from South Africa, potentially from Asia, and also working with some friends in Atlanta, trying to see how we can work together on getting all the incentives together in a big co-production.
Who's here from South Africa?
About 3 of them.
Okay, wait. So, do you know Sophiatown? Have you heard of Sophiatown? My great-great-uncle was the founder and built the first anti-apartheid city, and it was called Sophiatown. And I'm very proud of that. I'm the last living heir. And for those of you that don't know much about it, South Africa was apartheid and restricted against blacks in South Africa. My great-great-great-uncle, his name is Tobiinski, and he built and developed the first anti-apartheid city in all of South Africa called Sophiatown. And when apartheid came in, they took all the blacks out, beheaded them, and burned the town down. And I am very friendly with some of the major producers in South Africa. And it's your movie, and we're going to make this movie made. And I've talked to some major Academy Award producers that are going to come to South Africa and make your movie on Sophiatown. All right. That's the only. Okay. Now, pass the mic. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Liliana Kawazi. I'm from Brazil. We have a production company in Brazil, but we are trying to internationalize more of our projects. Our last feature film was shown in Cannes in the film market, and we participate in many international festivals. We received many awards. That's why this drove us forward to go to try more co-productions. And Corky is helping us to come to the US and even Canada and do more co-productions projects.
So I met Liliana at the Cannes Film Festival. I'm not going to tell the story how we met, but we will get into Brazil and why she wants to, and she did open up an office in Miami Beach, and we'll get into that. Okay, go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Menzies. I'm a Canadian producer working here in Ontario, and I've produced about 40-something movies over the last 15, 16 years. A lot in Canada, a lot in the U.S., Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Europe, because I guess this is the international co-pro, right? Yeah, okay, good.
That's cool. Hi, I'm Suzanne Lyons. My company is called Snowfall Films. I'm originally from New Brunswick in Canada, and I've been in the States now, living in Los Angeles for 26 years. What else? I've done 12, either produced or exec produced 12 feature films. And I wrote a book on indie film producing, low budget filmmaking, which was great fun. And I've produced films in Canada and UK and the US, of course.
Okay. So this is a panel that's going to concentrate on productions in, with, and outside of the United States. I want to start with the young lady from Belize who has a film festival. I want to say that I spoke at the Havana International Film Festival 2 years ago. One, it was the 37th. Two, I never knew they had a film festival. And it was the only year they had American movies in the film festival. Yeah, they did.
Not the first year?
Yeah, 2 years ago, two. They had 2 United States movies in the Havana International Film Festival.
They've had lots before.
What?
They've had lots before. Robert Redford has been going there for years.
Well, but they didn't have movies in the festival. They were made in Cuba. These were United States.
Okay.
And the movies weren't good. So in the same light, we in the States, except for right now, didn't know that you have a film festival.
Right.
And don't know much about how we in the United States could be involved or participate or have our films displayed or there. So run us through your festival.
Okay. It's not a huge festival. It's not as large as Toronto, of course. It's organic. It's a small, intimate festival, as you would consider it. It's 4 to 5 days, depending on which. If this year it's going to begin on Wednesday and end on a Sunday. Other times it's been Thursday to Sunday. We have 3 international jury. We usually try to find someone from Europe, someone from North America, someone from Caribbean or Latin America to be the jury. So we have a very diverse jury panel. They're always arguing because they have 3 different tastes. But we do have American films. I did study film in Cuba for 2 years, so I know that they do have some American films in the festival there. That's the one I trained under.
A lot of Argentina movies.
They have a lot of Latin American films. That's the whole point of their festival. I was way back in '94 is when I went to film school there, so it's been a while. But right, so our festival is open to the world. We try to keep a limit on how many films come from a certain country because we want it to be diverse. We've had as member of our jury, Tim Story has been a member of our jury. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim. Fantastic Four, the director of Fantastic Four, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Lynn Whitfield was a member of our jury about 2 years ago as well. So we haven't finalized our jury for this year, so maybe you have someone you want to suggest to be a member of our jury this year. We're open to suggestions, Corky.
Well, I don't know anyone, so I'm a bad person to ask. But all right. So I go to Belize, and how many movies do you show during your festival?
About 35.
And how many features of the 35?
I would do roughly about 10 feature films, narrative, and about 8 feature documentaries.
And do you do any discussions, panels, or?
If the filmmakers are present, then we have question and answer sessions. We've been covered by Variety, by Huffington Post, by Film Journal. So we do have some journalists who do come to the festival. And we are a sort of a social conscious festival. So we look at films that have a message, that are trying to for instance, there was a film from Mexico that spoke about some old people, about 90 years old, that the social security scheme had been stopped. And so it was looking at the lives of, it was a fiction, but it was showing how they had to survive at that age of life when they should have been relaxing with a pension. They had to be struggling and going into the supermarket trying to. So we look at films that make comments on the reality of what might be happening in our region. These are things, we look at stuff about human trafficking. There was a film by Jonas Coran called Desierto that looked at the border issue when people are trying to get to the United States. So we look for films that impact the lives of our audience and that we could relate to. But much of the themes in films are universal, so we are open to films from anywhere. But we like cultural interaction. We like when someone moves to a different country, what happens when you are faced with life, let's say in China, and how your life changes or reverse or something like that. So those are the kind of films that we're looking for. And again, it can come from anywhere. But yeah, so we are a film festival with sort of a social message.
Thank you. Liliana, you have branded very successfully your company in Brazil, and you've developed a certain cachet, I want to say, of branding in Brazil. Tell us why you want to move outside of Brazil and not just do movies in Brazil.
Well, in Brazil, we have, in average, around 100 to 200 films production per year. And these films are use some funds, run using Brazilian money. But with this new government, these funds are going to be very scarce. So we have to look for other sources of funding. And another problem is that most of the films that we produce in Brazil, they stay in Brazil. We distribute in some screening place, but at the end, it goes to a shelf. We don't make more money that we could do with all the streaming platforms. And now we are trying to change this because we have quality movies, we have good stories, we have very good and creative directors and producers, but we don't show this outside Brazil. For example, this year we have about five movies shown in Cannes. We received many awards, not only the Cannes Awards, but in many different international film festivals. Our production, the Brazilian production, is recognized as with quality, but at the end, we don't make money from this. And this we need to change, because it's this source of money that's going to be invested in new productions. That's why we need to go outside Brazil to reach other audiences and even stimulate Brazil to go outside, to go to the movie theaters. Because nowadays we are in a very deep crisis, economic crisis, and that's make the price of the ticket very expensive for the majority of the population. That's why we are a nation with 200 million people, but with a box office, it's very bad for Brazilian productions. If you launch Avengers or a Bond film, it's going to be a box office, but not for Brazilian productions that has a more artistic and more, how can I say, more storytelling about the Brazilian reality. So that's not driven people to go to move theaters. They prefer to stay at home because the Brazilian broadcast is very strong. So it curb people to go outside and pay for a ticket just for 1 hour and a half or 2 hours movie. So they prefer just turn on the TV, stay home. So it's really hard to make a market for us. So that's why maybe it's easier to try to go outside.
Okay. Suzanne? Yes. So I've known you for a long time. You've even been, you've even helped me with some of my talks in some of places in California. Since you've done movie projects in different countries from time to time, do you think it's easier to do them in America?
Wow, that's a good question. I guess it kind of depends on, for me anyways, and as an indie producer, it depends on my budget size, sometimes quirky. It just depends. For example, when I was working on my very first one, I thought this is kind of a studio movie. You know, it felt like a really good studio movie. It was a romantic comedy, and it really was a great little script. Took place in Minnesota or Minneapolis, whatever. And so when I pitched it to 44 different, companies at the studios, all the ones that would be interested in romantic comedies, and I would pitch it, I thought I did a pretty good job, and I'd say, and I'd tell them the pitch, and say, oh my God, it sounds amazing, Suzanne, you got to send that over, because it sounds quirky and funny and unusual and different. And then I'd call 2 weeks later and I'd say, what'd you think? And they'd say, oh my God, the best script we ever read. And we're passing. You're passing? Yeah, we're passing. It's too quirky and funny and unusual and interesting. The very same words that they said at the beginning, right? So that's when it took me, though, 44, phone calls to get it. And my partner, my film partner, lived in Delaware. And every time I call and I say, they're passing again, right? And this time, it was the night after the Academy Awards, where Brenda Blethyn had been nominated for her second Academy Award. And I called Kate to tell her, I talked to the last of the 44 companies were passing. And Kate didn't laugh. And I said, how come you're not laughing? You always laugh every time I call and say, this is how crazy this is, right? And we get it now. The studios don't want to take a chance on something that's new, and different. It's not based on a book or any kind of thing like that. And so Kate said, oh, my God, it's not American. It's not Milwaukee. It's the UK. It's British. It's a quirky British comedy. So we just, in a heartbeat, changed the location. That's all we did. The rest of the script stayed the same pretty much. I think instead of the trunk of the car became the boot of the car, things like that, right? But other than that, it was pretty much the same. And then called Brenda Blethyn, on a Monday, her agent in the UK. And by Thursday, we had Brenda Blethyn on the movie. And then just continue to kind of put it together. So it depends, and kind of like what that other gentleman was saying, it's like thinking way outside the box, almost that there is no box. Once you kind of get smart about it and realize, oh, my world is not just Los Angeles, it's not just the US, there's a whole world out there. And this is a personal story. Yes, it's a fun romantic comedy about a woman who falls in love in her 50s for the first time, but it's universal. Just because it feels kind of personal, it's universal. We all go through that at different times in life, all of us. And so once we kind of got that and realized, oh, yes, it can be that, then we started thinking the U.S. But the minute we thought the U.S. so quirky, I also thought, for some reason, I've always kind of had this innate knowledge that we have to please America, too, because that is, at the time, that was the biggest country. Now it's not necessarily the case. So, okay, well, who can we put on? Well, Christopher Walken would make a fun, it was about Undertaker, so a fun Undertaker. And Alfred Molina could be the other. So we started thinking a little bit differently. And I've learned from that movie to kind of think, who are the different people in different countries? Naomi Watts, for example, hadn't done a comedy at that point. And I called her agent, and they said, yeah, we'd like to have, Naomi do it. Even though it was a very low-budget indie film. with not, any big giant name director or, it was the writer's first script he'd ever written. So once I kind of learned that, I took that into my next movies, which I shot at home, the next one, which was in New Brunswick in Canada. But even though it was a big Canadian cast, I put James Caan on. I called James Caan's agent and put James on. And then Maribel Verdú, because I was thinking internationally, and Maribel Verdú had just done A Tu Mama Te Bien or whatever. And so, you're thinking, that was a big country. Spain was a very big territory at the time, one of the biggest, where a pre-sale could be $500,000. So I got to know the pre-sales. I got to speak to sales agents. I knew every sales agent. My very first AFM, I went to every single room. Sometimes I'd call security, and rightly so, but I pretty much got into every single room at the Lowe's in Los Angeles, got to know them all, and I would call and get estimates and find out what was going on around the world, and then I would think globally. I always did that because my first one took me a while. It took me a year of those 44 phone calls, but once I got it, I started thinking more globally. So I don't know if that answered the question or even came close, did it? Okay.
Okay, Rob, what is the controlling factor of where you shoot your movie?
Really, it just comes down to the script. So, as you were saying, really the world is our playground, and I think if you just have that in your mind as you go forward with your project, I think in today's world, we can be anywhere and really work anywhere. And I think the more you limit yourself, and I think that's a theme that we keep hearing, the more you limit yourself in your thinking, the harder it is. One of the things that I'm really big about is eliminating the roadblocks to production. And another theme that somebody said at the very beginning was know where this is going right at the beginning. Know your end game. And somebody told me that very early in my career, and I took it to heart. And I think as a takeaway from this, one of those key learning things is know who your audience is, how you're going to get it out there. And if you start with that information, you can sort of work your way backwards. And part of that could be the location, so British in your case, or American. It does have impact. So knowing where it's ultimately going to go right at the beginning, I think that's it.
I have another one of my stories to tell you. At the Cannes Film Festival 3 years ago, there is a huge tent on the beach where producers can have breakfast. And there are 20 or 25 round tables of 10 where there's a moderator at each table and there's a different topic that's talked. I cannot go to those breakfasts because they say an executive producer is not a producer, and I'm forbidden by going to those breakfasts. This year, I think I fixed it because on the movie that's premiering Tuesday that I'm the executive producer on, I said, make me a co-producer just so I can go to those breakfasts. Okay, but one day I get invited there by a client of mine, and the only table that was open was a global financing panel. So I sit there. I'm the only United States person at that table. And it was on global financing. And for an hour and a half, I'm sitting at the table as they're going around, realizing I'm going to be the last person to talk. And there was Guam, there was northern Italy, there was Ireland, there was Spain, there were all these countries. And for an hour and a half, I'm sitting there listening how everyone can do co-productions with one another, and how the United States is not part of that game. And I'm thinking to myself, an hour and a half, it's global, and not a mention of the United States, because all these countries are getting together, and they're getting money from all these countries, and we're excluded. So I'm going to try to be gentle and politically correct when I tell the end of the story. So it gets to me. And I said to the table, I've sat here for an hour and a half. It's a global financing panel. I believe, although I'm not that smart, that the United States is still part of the globe. I haven't heard the United States mentioned at all. So let me tell you about our incentive. Our incentive in the United States, our federal incentive that allows us to wipe out people's federal taxes, allows us to spend 25% in any foreign country that we want. So our country was considered every one of these countries at the table. It's a shame that you weren't, and I said, go F yourselves, and I left the table. And I felt great about that. I mean, because if you get an opportunity to stand up for the United States, I figure, and that's not very often, I figured that was my stand. So,
You had your breakfast first, though.
what?
You had your breakfast first.
Yes. Okay. So I leave, and about an hour later, I get a phone call from the head of the Northern Ireland Film Commission, and he said to me, "Corky, you were great, and I appreciated everything you said. Let's talk." And since that conversation, I've spent 25% on a few of my movies in Northern Ireland to take care and take advantage of their incentives. But when we talk about international productions, I know, since I'm the only one on this panel that lives in the United States, we are intentionally excluded from the global society. And that's okay, because I know why they did it, to start out with, and I know why. Okay, they did it because they believed at the time that the world got together is because at that time we had Hollywood. All right? And they figured the only way at that time that they can compete with Hollywood, which doesn't exist anymore, but at the time they can compete, is that they could all join together. Although if London gets out of the EU, I don't know where they'll be, but they decided that they would take care of themselves. I don't fault them. I think that they were sort of pushed into the corner, and they did that. Now, today, in the last few years, studios do not fund movies. They have no money. They distribute movies, but they do not fund movies. They all get together to co-fund these tentpole movies like Pirates of the Caribbean 15, 16, 17, but they do not really fund. There's no studio system, none at all. It belongs to the independent filmmaker. So I said to myself, how do we change this? We're thousands of filmmakers in the United States. I mean, you're talking about thousands upon thousands of people in the United States. And I realized there's nobody for them to negotiate with. They're not going to negotiate with me. They're not going to negotiate with my friends. And I could never get the United States, although I was fortunate to get Congress to approve the incentive, there's no way I could get the United States to step to the plate and say, we want our film, from the United States, we want our filmmakers to play nice. So that'll never happen. That'll never, ever happen. So I know that for the rest of my career and beyond, we in the United States will be barred from taking advantage of the world. All right? But that's okay, because we still can spend 25% in any one of your countries, and we will continue to be considerate to every one of the foreign countries until they're sick of it. And we are going to stand up and we're going to say that we welcome you. We welcome you, and that's my story. I mean, it's such an amazing situation. That happened to me in Canada, too. I had one of these conferences in Winnipeg, but that's a whole different story. What?
Can I say something?
Yeah, I welcome it.
I just want to say, Corky, I appreciate you, and can we talk afterwards?
Yeah. Look. I met Liliana. I told you you're at Cannes, and the brilliance of what she decided to do is the fact that, as you told me, is that you were not happy with the films not getting out of Brazil. And when they were finished in the theaters in Brazil, they would go on the shelf and they would never be seen. And you said to me, I believe our stories are worldwide. And the stories that we can tell affect and can talk to and about things that are international and global. And I don't want to restrict myself to Brazil. I mean, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And then I helped tell her about the federal incentives in the United States. I helped tell her about the 41 states in the United States that give money back by just spending in the United States. And then I said to her, and we can come back to Canada and spend our 25% here and get an extra 6%. So she said to me, that's what I want to do. And she said to me, I want to brand myself separately in the United States. I want to carry the branding that I did in Brazil and bring a new branding tool of that company into the United States. And I applaud her. Because in her country, it's not all countries, but in her country, she saw no survival in the film business by insulating yourself to Brazil. Is that true?
That's true. You know, any story that any one of us relate to that story, it makes that film international. You know, if one family struggle, one love story, any story that each one of us can be related to that story, it turns to be international. It doesn't need to be a foreigner character or a specific country or region. Anything can be international as long as it touches somebody. You know, that's why we try to bring our projects abroad and take advantage to co-productions and tax rebates. So I think that anybody can do that. So why not?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to know that we had at least 75 films from Brazil enter this year. I don't know where they came from, but they came en masse. So they're trying to get out, and we applaud that. I wanted to say that in Belize, through the Film Commission, we do welcome any sort of co-production. Well, we don't have an official co-production treaties with anyone, but we do welcome films coming to shoot in Belize. If you don't know where we are, we're 2 hours away from Houston, Dallas, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, so we're very close. We're the only English-speaking country in Central America. We have Maya temples, which you're not going to find anywhere else, and we're probably one of the few countries that still allow commercial filming on our temples. We don't have huge tax incentives. That's because our income tax, we don't pay income tax up to about 25,000, 30,000, so there's hardly any to negotiate out.
But your crews are a little cheaper.
Our crews are cheaper. We work very hard. They've had experience. We do a lot of low-budget films, so we're very used to independent productions. The red tape is very little. We make sure you get through as easy as possible through. You get your letters, and you are passing through customs extremely easily. We've always been praised for how easy it is to get through with no hassle. We work with different agencies. We have been working with the military as well. We have such a lot of jungle, a lot of empty roads. We've got rivers, so we can pass for Africa, the Congo. We have beautiful sea reefs. But we are also able to work with our national entities like the military and stuff, who are always willing to assist us if necessary to be a part of the production. So we make up with willingness and ease of production what you might think. You might think that you might be getting this great incentive in another country, but then you get there and you have lots of red tape that you're wondering what you were there for. So we're just letting you know how very easy it is to come and work in Belize.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will take one question if you have it, and if not, we have to finish. And I thank all of you coming. I want to also tell you there are still hug cards there, and there's still a hat there. So if any of you feel inclined to put a little money towards a great cause, do that. And thank you very much. And we hope that you were entertained a little, and we gave you a little information, and you go away feeling a little better about what you're going to do. Thank you.